You ever been in a place you know really well, like an office or your school, but way after everyone's gone home? It's weird, right? The silence is just heavy. The shadows get long, and every little noise seems 10 times louder. Well, we're about to dive into what happens when that familiar place becomes completely alien, all through the eyes of the only people there to see it, the night shift. This came from a custodian who spent 5 years working the overnight shift at a middle school. And wow, does it just perfectly capture that transformation. See, it's not just that the sound is gone, it's like something else has taken its place, an unnerving stillness that just feels wrong. So, let's really get into this transformation. How does a place that's so full of life and learning suddenly become so unrecognizable when the lights go out? Think about it. During the day, a school is just this constant buzz of noise. You've got bells ringing, kids shouting, lockers slamming shut. It's a living thing. But at night, all that energy just vanishes. And according to the custodians, that's when the building itself kind of takes over. It starts to creak and groan almost like it's breathing. In that massive emptiness, every tiny sound gets a spotlight. In your mind, well, your mind starts to fill in the blanks. This is always where that feeling of unease begins. You know, it never starts with some big dramatic event. It's always small, subtle things. Things you could almost convince yourself you just imagined. So picture this. You're alone, mopping a long, empty hallway. And out of nowhere, you hear that super distinct metallic click of a locker latch. Your head just snaps up, but it's just one open door and a whole wall of closed ones. It's easy to write off. Pressure change, faulty latch, right? And here is where your own brain can start to work against you. I mean, an old building is going to make noises. Pipes knock when the water pressure shifts. But when you're all alone in the middle of the night, that rhythmic thump, thump, thump can start to sound an awful lot like footsteps, maybe following you from the other side of the wall. This one is a specific sound a janitor kept hearing. He was working in the school's damp, concrete basement, and he'd hear this soft, dragging sound from the hallway, just like someone slowly sliding their shoe across the floor. He'd shine his flashlight, see nothing, and try to explain it away. But that sound, that's the first seed of a fear that is very, very hard to shake. But here's the thing, you can only rationalize for so long. Sooner or later, something happens that just smashes through all your doubts. This is that moment where the weird feelings become too specific, maybe even too intelligent, to just be the building settling. This is where the fear gets real. You can tell yourself it's the pipes or the wind 100 times. But what do you do when something happens that just completely defies any logical explanation? And this is the crucial part of another custodian's story. He's working alone on the third floor. It's a quiet, older part of the school. And he's a methodical guy. He knows his routine. He locks every single door. But then, as he's mopping the hall, he looks up and sees one of those very classroom doors is now standing open. And this is where something as simple as closing a door becomes terrifying. He walks over, pushes that heavy wooden door shut, hears the solid click of the latch, and goes back to his work, trying to get his heart rate back to normal. A few minutes later, he passes by that same spot, and the door is wide open again. And I don't mean just ajar, wide open. This is the detail that just shatters everything. He peeks inside the room, and a heavy box of old textbooks, one he knows for a fact was stacked against the wall, is now sitting right in the middle of the empty floor. You can even see the scuff marks on the tile. Something with a physical presence did this, and it did it while he was just a few feet away in the hallway. All right. Now we get to the climax. This is that moment where the unseen becomes completely undeniable. It's not about weird sounds or things being moved anymore. It's about that terrifying, absolute certainty that you are not just being watched, but that something is right there with you. So let's go back to that third floor classroom, right after he saw the box had been moved. The janitor calls out into the silence, hello? And from the back of that dark, empty room, he hears it. Not the wind, not the pipes, slow, deliberate breathing. He said it was like someone was hiding, but they wanted him to know they were there. And in a totally different school, another custodian had a similar experience, but this time in a huge, empty auditorium. After hearing what sounded like phantom footsteps on the stage, he was just trying to finish up his work when a voice whispered his name, clear as day, right behind him. He whips around, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, and there's absolutely nothing there. And what's so fascinating about this is the psychology of it all. In both of these peak moments, nothing is ever actually seen. There's no figure in the shadows, no face peeking through a window. The horror is entirely based on sound and that gut feeling. And that's the absolute core of the fear, isn't it? It's that skin-prickling, blood-running cold certainty that even though your eyes are telling you the room is empty, every other instinct in your body is screaming that someone is right there with you, just watching. So what happens after an experience like that? I mean, you can't just clock out and forget about it. That kind of fear, it leaves a mark. And the impact was very real, and it was lasting. The custodian who heard the breathing, he refused to work on the third floor alone ever again. The guy from the auditorium, he quit not long after his experience. They started locking doors they weren't even supposed to, just to try and feel safe. It really shows you that these experiences, whether you think they're supernatural or not, they have a deep and lasting psychological effect on the people who go through them. Their fear wasn't just some spooky story. It had real consequences that changed their entire working lives. So what's the big takeaway here? It seems like these familiar places we know so well have a whole second life, one that only starts after we all go home. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? The next time you're walking through an empty hallway, maybe just pause for a second and listen. What stories might you hear?